it's permission. When you can give yourself the permission to eat certain foods, you automatically start to reduce cravings that are intense. That can help you as well as ditch, getting into those vicious cycles of restriction and obsession and overeating. And when you're able to do that, you just don't have that need anymore. And it helps to regulate your nervous system. So feeling comfortable around food, making it feel safe again, is a big part of it.
You're listening to the Madinat Mom podcast, where real moms talk, experts share insights, and coffee fuels the chat so you can thrive in motherhood. I'm Noor, your host, and I'm here to remind you that you are not alone in your journey. My guest today is Maitha, a certified holistic nutritionist, intuitive eating coach, dessert creator, and mama of 2 girls. She's the founder of Maitha Treats, which is the Dubai-based brand redefining desserts as a daily act of nourishment. Her work helps women rebuild trust with food, find balance without restriction, and create a healthier, kinder relationship with food that actually lasts. So welcome, Maitha, to the Madinat Mom podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I think after a few wrong turns, I finally got
directions.
Here. Yes.
Well, we have you. You got here now.
Yes, I'm here.
And you got some yummy treats, but we'll get to the treats in a bit. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I am a mom of 2, as you mentioned. I feel like you had such a good intro of me. And I'm someone who is generally just really obsessed with creating desserts that really taste good. I feel like there was always the stigma of, dessert is the opposite of health. And I really wanted to just change that. Besides that, where will you most likely find me? Home. I am such a homebody, and I love that I get to wake up, start my day with movement, see my daughters after, do work, see my daughters again, and then end with however way the day was going to be. I feel like, I have a schedule, and I don't really have a strict schedule. So I don't know about you, but I find that you don't know where the day goes, which is exciting. But also a little bit of structure is, I feel like, the most I can do right now as a mom, and it's working. So yeah.
Yeah, you have a baby at home,
yes,
3-month-old.
She's 3 months.
I don't think you can get much structure with 3 months.
Exactly, and I think sometimes I would want to, and there's that little voice that creeps in. But as you just said, when you just reminded me that, I feel like it's so nice to have conversations with other moms, because it's such a reminder of don't you feel like sometimes you need that little pep talk from another mom, even though you're yeah, I get it, but hearing that just yeah, actually, I do have a 3-month-old. I don't need to have this, rigid structure.
Yeah, I think it's so important to feel like someone else feels the same way you're feeling. We were just talking about this downstairs.
Yeah.
How our whole schedule right now really revolves around what time our babies need to eat, right?
Yes.
Because they're very similar in age.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a bit about when did you, get into holistic nutrition, and explain a bit what is holistic nutrition?
Yeah. So, when you come into looking into nutrition in general, I feel like the holistic side is really looking more than just beyond, when someone says that you're going to go see a nutritionist, they go into some particular advice of, okay, this is what you should eat and this is what you shouldn't eat. And I'm sure there's more to it, but I feel like when you're looking at it from a holistic approach, there is more of how are you? How are you as a person? What is your lifestyle like? What is your sleep like? What currently season are you in at the moment? Because only when you get the full picture of someone's lifestyle and what they would like to achieve, that is sustainable. That's the number one thing. When I get someone saying I want to lose 5 kg by 6 weeks, No, it doesn't work that way. Why would you want to do anything that just will not support you in the long term? So I feel like that holistic approach is looking from all dynamics. Now, how did I get into that, as well as being an intuitive eating coach, is that I personally had my own struggles with food for about 10 years. So I had a binge eating disorder, which basically is, I don't know if you know what binge eating means. So it's different to overeating, because people think oh, me too, I eat so much. It's no, it's more of a consistent pattern that you do where you find yourself restricting, from certain foods. And it can be things that, can be desserts, but when some people who define themselves as being really clean, which I used to do, was, oh, I don't eat that much bread. I stop eating after 6 p.m. So you do this whole thing, but then there is this voice that wants to rebel. And it's just actually a part of in the brain chemistry that you then just eat anything and everything within a few hours, and you don't even know who you are. You're not even hungry. You just keep doing it out of discomfort. So I really had a big struggle with that. And it took me a long time to understand that this was a problem because of what I was doing with my food. I thought I was healthy. You know, back then when you think about, oh yeah, like only just focus on eating protein with your meals, or don't eat any sweets, maybe just have something a little bit, be naughty on the weekend. And it seems like it's fine and it's normal, but actually there's like this mental restriction that can happen after that. So I feel like when I had to really come into terms, there was a moment in my life where I was feeling the most sick. My vitals weren't that great. And I remember my doctor at the time, she said the most basic thing. She's like, Maitha, like you just need to have more nourishing foods. And I was like, no, what do you mean? Like, I'm healthy. I am healthy. Like, look what I'm eating. Look what I'm doing. And it was one of those things where I think like I had an epiphany. And it was at the first time I realized I was the one making myself sick. I was the one who, even though I thought I was the healthier choice, was keeping myself in that cycle. Now, it wasn't an overnight success, so I don't want you to think like, oh, wow, like the girl had an epiphany and it was great. But it was more of, I started to be more aware of like, wait, I really restrict myself. What if I started to operate from a different mindset? What if I started to look at being healthy, like the sustainable health isn't really because of control. It's about the connection. How do you connect with food, And I think that was such a big thing, because back then it was like, how do I control my food? If you can connect with food, that means you get to understand without these guilt parameters of like, okay, I eat this because it makes me feel good. I want to add some bread because it gives more substance to my food. So it's a very different type of narrative. And I think that's really how I landed in, how can I then, like when I finally healed, like how can I, and it took many years by the way, but how can I then make sure that this can continue and can be spread as a message? So when I wanted to start my business for Maitha Treats, I wanted to really get educate myself a lot more in plant-based nutrition. And that's why I wanted to get certified as a holistic nutritionist. And then for the intuitive eating, it was the same thing, like, because I knew I had to deal with it and I finally got there, but then I needed also what are the strategies that I need to help implement for those who I want to help? So it was like a whole full 360-degree circle. And that's sort of how I got into the intuitive eating coach, and then also being a holistic nutritionist.
That's incredible. Was that before you became a mom?
Yes. So all of this was actually before I became a mom. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And when did you launch your business?
So I launched in end of April 2020. So fully in the midst of COVID. And it was an idea that I had for a while. I loved wanting to like create something that was like a dessert, but at the same time, there was this feeling that it wasn't good enough, because I was very much like, amongst my siblings, I was the academic. I went and studied abroad I was out for 7 years. I wanted to like do my master's, and everything was like business related. And then I want to come back being like, I just want to bake, It's like all these years of education. And then, but then I was like, okay, this is something that's been coming in and out of my life, of my conscious. So I think that was the biggest step that I wanted to just overcome. Sometimes we think the most basic thing, it's not in AI, you're not in fintech, who are you? And it's not like that at all. So once I was able to overcome that, I feel like I wanted to, get into that. And the reason I started was because, remember when I told you I had spoken to that doctor and how I started to have a different perspective? So I started to include all sorts of food groups. And then I started to feel off again. And the doctor had told me, just avoid gluten, dairy, eggs, and refined sugars. And from someone who has a history of restriction and being told now, not even out of my control, it wouldn't even be under my control, it would be out of my control, being like, now you need to avoid this. I started to get scared, because I thought, I'm going to go back to the same pattern, that whole restriction cycle where I'm going to binge and then I'm going to restrict again. So I was like, hold on, it's not going to happen. And I started to think about, okay, what are the things that I feel like I'm going to miss? Desserts. So desserts was like the number one thing. I don't know about you, but like we were a family where like after lunch you have something sweet. Did you have some, I don't know, is this something for you as well? Like,
I mean, I'm the sweet tooth in the family.
Okay.
So it's always dessert for
Okay,
me.
it's always
Anytime,
dessert.
any day, any place, I'll take it.
Okay, yeah. So for us, it was like a big thing. We grew up in the household where, especially after lunch, we needed something sweet. My dad and my mom were just the same, like the same wavelength of that level. So I reminded myself, like, okay, I need something that is sweet. And I did bake when I was around 12 years old. I was the one for the festivities who used to do the baking. And my grandma baked a lot. So I was surrounded by that. I mean, back then it was like, your typical, like, I don't know, there used to be like these Hershey's chocolate baking books. So I still have them, by the way. So I used to make all sorts of different things. So I wasn't completely not familiar with the kitchen. And then I started to be like, okay, what are the alternatives? If I can't add gluten, what can I do? So, it was your typical story. I went to the office and I was just taking it for myself. I was like, I'm going to treat this as something that's a temporary season in my life. So I feel like if someone has been told you have to avoid something, instead of being like, oh no, why me? What's like trying to have that sort of mentality? First of all, have it, have your moment, but then, okay, what do you know can happen if you start to avoid that? You might feel better. So people were eating it and I thought, okay, no, I only thought health, like only something that was seen as really healthy would like that. And I realized a lot of people were liking it. So that was sort of the pinpoint where I was like, okay, maybe I should do something about this. And the funny story is the cookie that I had launched with, I only had one cookie at the time. And then just before, like once I launched, I was like, oh, I should probably have a few more products. It wasn't even the reason why I have a business today. That one actually it hasn't phased out, but it's not my number one. And what I like about this is that sometimes if you have an idea, you might think that this is it, this is what's going to get me to go somewhere, but it could also be your stepping stone to get you to do something else. And so I remind myself that because we get so caught up and stuck, especially as women, like we have to have everything planned from A to Z. Not all, I know I don't want to stereotype as well, but it was just what I needed to have a bit of confidence to get something going. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the journey of the Maitha.
That's incredible. And I completely agree that sometimes when you launch something, you have an idea and you're like, this is it. And if this doesn't work, then the whole idea is not going to work. Yeah. But actually that could be a stepping stone to what you're supposed to be doing. Yes. And I'd love to hear more about, where Maitha Treats now specifically is, but more so how your motherhood journey affected how you lead your business.
Yeah. So with, I would say like, with the business in itself and, that mentality, like a few little things there is, you were telling me just before we got on the camera, I love that you just get on and you talk, and I was like, oh, it's not always easy for me. The weirdest thing happened to me, it was a few months after I started the business, I actually started to feel like I wasn't showing my full self in the sense of, okay, there's this girl, they're like, okay, she sells these healthy desserts. I wish I could be like her, because I started to get those messages. I wish I was as disciplined as you. So when I started to get that, I was like, hold on, I'm sending the wrong message here. And I actually had opened up, just me talking now about my binge eating. I just turned the camera on. I think it was like 8 minutes, and that's a really long, way too long now that I think about it. And I just didn't even edit it, and I just put it on my Instagram. And I had a lot of people, especially women, being like, wait, I have this, or I've experienced this, or I didn't know this was a thing, or, oh, wow. I was like, oh gosh, like this isn't just a me issue. Some others also have that. And at that moment, it was just maybe a month into launching, I realized that I had that like moral social responsibility to talk about my treats a very specific way. So I'm saying, yes, they're healthy, but if you'll ever notice, I never lead with saying, eat my cookie because it only has 100 calories. Eat my cookie because it's, it's the only guilt-free thing that you can allow yourself to eat. I started to steer away from any of that. And I never even did that anyways, but I realized I didn't want to do that. And that's basically how like the messaging of what I do is like, nourish your cravings. It's not about something else. It's that whole story for me that I thought, that needs to happen. So years now, I'm really, 5 years into the business, I'm really happy and proud that I've continued to stick to that. I will still have people being like, if you just talked about the calories, you'd get more business. Or a lot more people like in the fitness industry would say, okay, I'll have it just because of this. It's not that I don't share that information. Of course, legally, I have to put that information on my website. But sometimes when I'll get someone asking me like, okay, but how many calories? And then what about this? And what about that? I'm like, how does it make you feel? And I know it sounds a bit woo-woo. It's like, no, it's good. Like, I didn't have bloating. I didn't have sugar crash. I was like, if you can try to lead your food with some of that, I feel like it can really help. Now, motherhood and business. So I'm a workaholic. I would work, and especially when you have your own business, I do have a team. They're mainly in the operation side, so the baking, but I'm your, marketing manager hat. I'm your, all the recipes. I'm your emailer. You name it. I'm sure, as you wear all these different hats. Yeah. I'm like, yep, that's me again. So I felt like with all of that, I was really scared when I was, first of all, going to be giving birth soon to my first daughter. First, I treated my pregnancy like a deadline, which I'm not sure why I did that, but I was like, I have to get all this done because if I stop, then the business stops. So I was really scared about that. But one thing is, and I really love this, is that motherhood has taught me to step away and be okay with that. Some days it'll look okay and some days it won't, but it doesn't matter. I feel like I'm trying to be more present in the time I have with my daughters. So before I was like, okay, I'm going to work until 7 to 8 till 9 p.m. Now I'm like, oh, it's 3 or 4 p.m. I'm going to stop working. And this can wait. When you have like your tasks, I used to be, I don't know how you are, but when you have like 7 tasks, I need to get those 7 tasks done that I have put on my list. Now it's carryover. On to the next day. And I think we need that. Because you also realize that you need to be more strategic, right? You need to know, okay, is everything really as important as you say it is? I'm going to probably say no. Like, are those 7 things just equally important? No. So I really try to focus on those. Don't get me wrong. It's still a whole world now, especially now with having a second baby. It's not the same because now Sophia has been a bit more independent. She's 2, but now I also have a baby who's like a lot more reliant on me. So it's how can you try to put some pockets of time with your kids, but then also, put those pockets of that. But then the guilt. You had mentioned something to me about mom guilt, and I did forget a little bit now. Like, I'd love for you to also just remind me of like what you see as, instead of, when you think of mom guilt, what do you think? Because when you had said that to me, even just like, how sometimes you don't remember the words, but you remember the feeling? Yeah. And that's sort of like the feeling I remembered. Mm-hmm. And what was it that you said about mom guilt?
Yeah. Well, I think in our first conversation.
Yes, in the very first conversation we had.
I feel like mom guilt is not something that you can get over, and I feel like it's actually a positive thing.
Yeah, that's when you were saying that, and I was like, wait, what, really?
Yeah, because it means that you really care. It means that you always want to do better. Yeah. And I think as long as you have mom guilt, it actually shows that you really care and you always want to do better. Yeah. I don't think it's something that we should get over. I think it's something that we should learn how to manage, that we should also think about the fact that we need to be able to take care of ourselves to be able to give to our kids, right?
100%. It's very true. And I think it's, sometimes it's just that there's this thing where, when they think of like the work-life balance, I feel like there really isn't like the work-life balance, mm-hmm. but it's like, what can you give that day, right? So sometimes 100%. I feel like I'm more of a mom today. Yeah. Tomorrow, I'm sometimes more of a business owner, mm-hmm. And that's okay. Like, I think we don't have to keep being everything all at once. And I think that's the problem that we can have, especially as a woman. Like, multitasking is a thing. Let's multitask. Don't worry, I can do this. I can take care of the baby while writing this email, while also doing this and that. But then you're like, where do you come into place?
100%.
As you, not as the business or the mom or the wife or whatever.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that you can have the perfect balance in one day. Yeah. But as you said, there are days where you're going to be more of a mom. Yeah. And then there are days where your business is going to need you more. Yeah. And it's understanding that every day is going to look different and being okay with that. Yes. Setting some time to your kids, setting some time to yourself, setting some time to work, and understanding that some days you're going to give more to others, and that's okay, right? Yeah. But I actually met your cookies through the Lactation cookies. Okay, yes. Those, listen, really, I said this before, I'm a sweet tooth. Yeah. But I love your cookies, and I've told you this. Thank you. And I've always had, like, when I was breastfeeding my son, I was looking at, cookies and stuff online so that it can support, the lactation. Yeah. And I came across your cookies and I had them and I was like, these are actually really, really good. Can you tell us what products specifically support the production of breast milk?
Yeah, of course. So I think what is also, I feel like the business and I are growing together. So you'll notice as I'm a mom, the lactation cookies are there because I was asked a while back, like before I was like, year 2 in the business and I had just gotten married. I wasn't, planning, I was going to have kids, but not then and there. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Not that I don't want to create this, but it just doesn't feel the right season in my life. And I really want to make sure I can test it out myself. And I can't do it when I don't have a baby. So when I had my daughter, Sophia, first I was like, okay, I'm not gonna jump into it, right? Let me learn about it. So what are some great ingredients in general and then ingredients in our cookies that I wanted to kind of put together? So, you'll hear that like basically what you want to do is you want to help stimulate the production of prolactin, which is the hormone that's going to help create more milk. So things like your flax seeds, like your gluten-free oats. There's also brewer's yeast, and there is like a halal version and also a gluten-free version, which was not as easy to find, but that was something that I thought, okay, I also want to see how I can add that in there. You can drink, fenugreek and so forth. But for my cookies, when I was doing some research about like the lactation cookies and maybe the ones you can just make at home, they were always like your oatmeal cookie, maybe with a chocolate here and there, or it was so strong in the flavor, or when you feel like you have to eat a cookie, that is where I was like, I don't want that. I don't want you to feel like you have to eat this, it's that you get to eat this. And that was like a big part for it. So I looked at what I already made because a lot of my stuff I already put in oats and flax seeds and we make our own chocolate. So there's a lot of that wholesomeness already, but how do I like pump it? Pun intended, like the pump on the pump,
Yeah.
So I really increased the concentration of the flax seeds, the oat flour, the gluten-free brewer's yeast as well, the coconut oil, like one of the other ones, the chocolate. I don't know if you know this, but it actually also had some apricot inside, and apricot again can also help. So when it comes to, I feel like your supply and with cookies, I find that I've been getting so many beautiful stories from moms about it. And then also moms who are like really stressing, like I'm 2 weeks postpartum and I'm pumping and nothing's coming out. And I was like, I think there's so much misinformation out there. And also I'm not a lactation consultant expert in any way, but I'm an experienced mom, and you've had your experience as well. And I feel like I just was like, listen, your best section right now is your baby. Your baby will help you to get that sort of production, and then try to see after. And she was like, you're the first person who told me that. And it was just like, because there's so much stress already, and you just need that one person, if they're going through something tough, to just give them a little bit of something. But yeah, I only still have 2 flavors since I started. I eat them every day too.
I mean, you're still also breastfeeding your daughter.
Yes. So my baby is 3 months. So the breastfeeding journey, second time around, it's like, I know what was happening, but I'm really trying to savor it more, because you're just, as a second time mom, I don't know, how did you find the experience as a second time mom with breastfeeding? Or because it's such a personal story. And I always find that I try to be conscious of how I share my breastfeeding journey as well, because I also am aware that it can be really tough on certain moms, or they might not have had the same experience. So I try to be conscious of that before I really share my story about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, I definitely had different experiences with my first and my second, but also it's because my mindset was different with my first and my second. My second, I feel like, as I hear from a lot of moms, but with your second, you're usually in a better place, right? You not only know what to expect, but also you delegate more comfortably. You give your time. You give yourself more time.
True.
These are all factors in how you feel
100%.
And how you enjoy the process as well.
True.
I heard a quote once that said, it was on the Sunira Madani podcast, and her guest said, "Feed yourself first." And what that really means as a mom is not only that you really have to eat first, but it's because it will give you more patience to be present for your kid.
True.
And that also applies to breastfeeding, right? That applies to everything as a mom.
Yeah.
If you take care of yourself first, if you give yourself first, you're going to have more patience and more presence to be there for your little ones. And so it was the same for me the second time around when I was breastfeeding. I always made it a thing that I'm not gonna sit and breastfeed when I'm like drained, or when I haven't had lunch, or when I'm stressed, or when I'm this. I'm gonna try. Of course it happens, because we're all human, you know?
Yeah, of course.
But I'm gonna try to really, like, when I'm gonna breastfeed, I'm gonna be there in the moment. And so I need to feed myself first.
Of course.
You know? So I think it's also a mental state
100%.
that plays a big role. But as you said, some women struggle with breastfeeding. I know it's not easy. Even the process of breastfeeding, it takes a lot, you know, from the woman's body. But I'd love to hear more about the mom behind Maitha. Can you tell us a bit about what it's like to be a mom of two little girls? Because they're small. Can we say you have 2 under 2?
So when I had given birth, that was the thing. So I say they're 2, and they're 2, and oh my gosh, there was something that I had to say and I forgot about that. But they were 2 and under, and now they're 20 months apart, so in age.
Okay. Okay, what's it like?
So what it's like, I think in general at the beginning, I think my favorite part when I had given birth was that moment where I held one baby on my hand and the other one in the other, and it just felt like this feeling that these 2 are mine, you know? And I think that was a really, really special part. And there's also some challenges. I think with having 2, you know, the first one, who's 2 years old now, is a lot more aware of the attention I give her and the attention I don't give her. So I noticed, you know, sometimes she kind of acts out a little bit more now, and she wasn't doing that. And it's because she's trying to be like, Mama, I'm here too. And I really try, you know, I'm trying to, if I say anything to my Leia, my 3-month-old, I directly look at her after, or the other way around, I go to her first. So there are these moments where it can be quite tough, because, you know, your attention has to be in both ways. Now, the young one doesn't understand it, but she needs to be fed by you. So it's something that I'm trying to just be a bit more conscious. So, for example, I felt I was a little guilty of this, but, you know, my routine is like, I wake up in the morning, and then I first feed Leia, then I give her to my nanny. I either take a little nap or don't, and then I move, and I do some sort of movement. At the beginning, it was all about pelvic floor. So I've taken care of myself more this time around. I didn't the first time. I didn't even know that I should go and get checked, just to see, like, if I have, you know, ab separation, or what does that recovery look like. So I was like, no. This is like, I think I do that mentality of feed myself first when it comes to movement, because it's like my therapy. So I do that. And then when I would come down, I'd have my smoothie. So I'd have my phone looking at different things, but I'm like, oh, I'm here with you, Sophia. And I realized I started to do that. So I was like, no. She's going to pick up on that. And then she likes to grab my phone because she sees her mom take photos and videos for work, right? So she sees that. So she's starting to do that too. She's like, oh, I'm going to take videos. And so I'm trying to just like put that on the side and really give her that, even if it's 10 minutes, not just at the beginning of the day. And I feel like it's slowly starting to help her. Now, I've struggled because I had found myself signing up to it's called winning the toddler phase stage, because there was just like this week where everything was a no, or a meltdown, or a tantrum. And unfortunately, when it first happened and it was like such a big emotion, she wouldn't get in the car seat, for example. And we were 30 minutes in the car parking lot. I was with my mom, and my Leia was screaming, crying because she's hungry. And I raised my voice at Sophia. I felt instantly so bad for doing that. I think that like we're such different generations now. I mean, I feel like, you know, my mom back then would have done that and we're like normal about it. But we realize now like it's not the answer, especially when they're that young of an age. And I took it upon myself to be like, hold on, what I did there was just... It happens, I'm human, and it might happen again, like I'm not gonna lie, but I wanted to step back and like, okay, let me read a little bit more about this. Like, me being calm versus aggravating the situation is not, what's gonna be better. So I think just this week, because last week was a little bit of like a turbulence, I'm like starting to see how she's picking up on my energy. Energy is everything. Children, we forget about that. As young as, even probably months old to 2 years old. If you're always frantic, they're going to feel frantic, right? So I'm trying to be a lot more conscious of my energy, which I wouldn't have done if I wasn't a mom, or I would have just like, I'll get to it later, or I'll work on myself later. So I think being that mom is, and you said like we try to work on being a better version of ourselves, and we have to do it all in once, go either. But I just like that if I wasn't a mom, I wouldn't be taking these steps to do that. And also I can probably apply that in other parts of my life, because I can be someone who easily gets stressed in life. So yeah, that's like the story of it.
You know, we forget as moms that we're actually learning.
Yeah.
With our little ones, right?
True.
And we're growing with our little ones.
Yeah.
It's not just them, it's also us. And I think every single day we become a better version of ourselves. That is learning from them as well.
100%.
But you know, we grow up in a world now. We're growing up in a time when there's a lot of comparison and there's a lot of negative talk, and you said it yourself, a lot of women reached out to you and said, I'm dealing with binge eating, I'm dealing with this. Being a mom of 2 girls, what does that look like for you at home? How do you incorporate a little bit of self-kindness with your girls?
I feel like people think about, it's always the little moments that you do consistently they're actually the big moments, right? So I feel like, I want them to see that mama takes care of herself. I want them to see. So it's, how is it that I talk about food in front of them? What's my reaction to it? How is it that I talk about it if I'm tired, for example? So just to give you an example. So for food, I don't want him ever to hear me keep saying like, Mama's been so bad today because I ate this, or Mama has been, Mama's going to work really hard in the gym tomorrow because she ate this. We forget that those little things are a big thing and an impact for them. So the way you talk about your food, your body, even for example, Mama's tired, I need a little break, because you want to also teach them that self-care, taking care of yourself is good. And if you're constantly giving, then they might pick that up later on in their lives to be like, I need to just be a full giver, and I don't need to be someone who takes, moments of for themselves. The other little moments I feel like with them is just having that, like that sense of just being present with them as well. So, and movement. So, this was happening with my first daughter. I worked out throughout my whole pregnancy. I use the word worked out, but also I say move, because I really mean this. It's such a big part of my life. It used to be toxic, because in that phase where I was binge eating, what would I do? I would over-exercise to make up for it. But I don't do that anymore. It's more like my own setting. And my daughter would be like, Mama, exercise. So I want her to see it in a positive way. I don't want her to see that I'm burning 150 calories. Like, okay, give me a second, Mama, because I need to burn another 100. I don't want to have those conversations with her. And again, like we would all probably say something that we didn't mean to, we didn't want to pass on down to. But I think that we're not here to strive to be a perfect mom. That is not the goal here. We're just trying to show up better. We're trying to be a bit more present where we can, and just be mindful of the language and what we're saying. Because, for example, my mom, she's my best friend, absolutely love her. And when you ask a lot of women, because like I've worked with hundreds of women in this field, where did this start? What was your first memory? Usually it was in a home base, or something your friend said, your auntie said, maybe your mom, and that sticks. Like that can really stick. We all had that moment. And for example, my mom, so she never liked her lower part of her body, like her thighs. She'd be like, oh, I have such big thighs. We all have that in the family. And you're like me, Maitha. So she would never be like, you're big, you need to work out, you need to do this. Never. But it was her associating herself with me that then being like, I'm different. This is not a good thing. I need to change this. And that was a small, subtle thing. And it was weird, but I have to say, like, I've never admit this, but I would like look at people, and I wouldn't even see their face. I would just look at their legs. Like it became such an obsession that like, and you would be like, oh, she has skinny legs. She must have a great life. What? That makes no sense, right? What we see of a person, like they can have that ideal look, an ideal body, or whatever you want to say, but they aren't necessarily mean that they're happy or healthy or have it all together. But we still have this whole thing that if you look like this, and by the way, I'm not against looking good, okay? I don't want anyone to think that. I love to get up. I want to put my makeup on. I want to do my hair. I don't want it to be thing, but I don't want it to also be the only thing, right? So these are the sort of small little things to talk about that build up the bigger moments in their lives.
Maitha, can you tell us, what does a healthy relationship with food really look like?
Yeah. So number one, it's not having perfect meals. It's not telling yourself, oh, I know when I'm hungry, so I'll eat, and I know when I'm full, so I'll stop. A lot of people think that, especially when it comes to like even the term intuitive eating. But a healthy relationship with food starts with trust. So meaning trust that you can eat your food and not have obsessive thoughts after. Trust that you can enjoy a dessert and not feel like you're going to have a guilt spiral or that you're going to have to make up for the next day. Trust that you will choose meals that are satisfying, not because they might have a certain number that's next to it, in terms of a calorie. And I think it really does build with that. A lot of the times when people think of having a healthy relationship with food, I would also say it's permission. When you can give yourself the permission to eat certain foods, you automatically start to reduce cravings that are intense. That can help you as well as ditch, getting into those vicious cycles of restriction and obsession and overeating. And when you're able to do that, you just don't have that need anymore. It helps to regulate your nervous system. So feeling comfortable around food, making it feel safe again, is a big part of it. So I had mentioned before that, when people think of dessert, they automatically think it's the opposite of health. But if you are able to pick foods that can still make you feel good. So I don't want to say that, I've had to go through a whole journey when it comes to, what is the food that is healthy? How can I make it delicious? How can I make it exciting? Like if I ask you to give me a healthy meal, what would you say?
Oh my God.
I know, I'm putting you on the spot. No, I know.
The first thing, but I'm going to say, I know this is the wrong answer.
No, but there is no wrong answer.
The first thing that pops to my mind is just a salad, but that's,
Thank you.
Again,
exactly.
I know that's not the case.
Exactly. But what you had just said is probably on so many women's minds, right? I'm going to be healthy, so I'm going to have a salad. And I think now what I also love about Instagram is that, first of all, these creators that have all these different types of food accounts, the amount of work that they have to do for all of that. Mm-hmm. And so many of them have such a beautiful way to showcase otherwise. So I'm plant-based predominantly. Again, it has nothing to do with that. But if you just write those certain terms in there. So when you say a salad, great, but you know that you can also have a red Thai curry that has better quality noodles, get a good quality red curry paste and add some veggies and you're good. And you want to add some protein. But would you have thought if I said a healthy meal is a red curry, like a noodle curry? Mm-hmm. Probably not. And if you knew that that was part of, say, your meal for the week, would you look forward to that? Would you get excited being like, yeah, I can eat this once a week, every week? Or would you, I don't know, maybe you don't like red curry. I'm just thinking.
I do.
Or just like a Thai or some sort of thing. So I feel like we need to start to really look at it differently. And again, I'm not against salads, but I'm not a salad leaf and a piece of protein on it. Give me substance. Is there a crunch in there? Is there an element of fats that a lot of people feared, which I used to fear? Avocados have too many calories, so I'm not going to add it. And you think you're doing yourself a favor, but you're really not. There is a lot of brain chemistry in general, what is actually happening when you deny yourself something, right? You're just going to want it more. So if you are able to create something that's satisfying, your brain will connect that she's fed me, she's made me feel satisfied. Therefore, I don't need to have those intensified cravings later on. So it's not even that day, it can be the week or even a month later. So a healthy relationship with food is creating meals that are satisfying and not denying yourself that you can't have that. So it's like a full picture of things. And so that's why permission. It's about giving yourself permission. I'm not saying give yourself permission to go all out and go crazy, because then again, you're going into a cycle that that's going to end up not being, I guess you could say, not healthy or not sustainable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, again, knowing that a salad doesn't necessarily have to mean that this is your healthy meal, right?
Yeah.
It's the first thing that pops to your head because for so long it's what we were told. And it's only until recently that we've started discovering the different kinds of food, protein, having carbs, having this.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in asking you how you navigate sugar cravings because as a new mom, you know, you don't get a lot of sleep, and we know that lack of sleep actually leads to higher cravings. So how do you navigate that?
100%. So this might sound counterintuitive. I manage my sugar cravings by having sugar. I mean, if that makes sense. But like, if I were to break that down even further, I manage it by giving myself that dose of joy on a daily basis. So what we make for Maitha Treats is intentional in terms of the ingredients. So it doesn't make sense if I tell you, you know what, just have something sweet every day and you're not going to have a big craving. But if you are eating something that is going to leave you feeling sluggish, bloated, foggy, then I'm not doing you a favor, right? Like, that's not going to help you because now you might not have the sugar craving, but you've got all these other symptoms. So that was where I came up with Maitha Treats, and also just the bridge in general. And it doesn't have to be like a cookie or something else. It can even be like a good quality piece of dark chocolate. If you can give yourself, like, I call it like the moment of my day where I really try not to have anyone around me, you know, love my daughters, but it's me time there. I normally will I'll have a drink with it. So either a green tea or like a coffee. And it can be 5 to 10 minutes. But giving that self that permission to eat it and enjoy that reduces those intensified cravings, because also, you know what, that tomorrow you can have it again. It's not a one-time thing. It's not on a special occasion. The more we make a bigger deal of something, the more we're going to treat it as a bigger deal in our brain after. It's just the way it works. If you start to neutralize it in that sense, not to say that you should desensitize yourself from feeling joy from it, but it becomes part of your routine. That's like my biggest tip. So if you're like a new mom, you know, I mean, the lactation cookies are also a great thing that you can have, a few cookies a day, but have something. Do it on purpose. Plan it on purpose. Because when you don't plan it and you're like, oh, I'll see how I feel. This is the other thing. I'll see how I feel if I actually need it or I really don't want it. When you do that, what you're really doing is you're trying to resist doing it. And so you're almost proud that, like, oh, I didn't need to eat something sweet today. Oh, look at me, I'm good. But then what happens? And the next day or two, it'll intensify. If you plan on purpose, if you decide that every day I'm going to have it between this time, it will be something that will desensitize all the rest.
Mm-hmm. Okay, amazing, Maitha. And I know that you've prepared a guide for us. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you like a little bit of a kickstart in how is it that you can start to rebuild that trust with food. And it's going to be simple enough because at the end of the day, we can't just be sitting there and having like really long to-do lists. So they're going to be small, quick wins. And just to start you off with, you know, when you think about how is it that you can start to rebuild your relationship with food is start with awareness. Like, be aware of where you're at right now. What is it that you can do? And when you think of like, what can I eat today? Instead of being like, okay, I want to be healthy or I'm going to have a healthy relationship, so let me think of the foods I shouldn't eat. That's not the way to do it. Instead is, what can I add to make myself feel better? Just that simple flip is like you're operating from abundance rather than scarcity, and your brain, and I keep going back to the brain, but if you're going back to the brain, that automatically sees it differently. It doesn't see it as being restricted. It's like, oh, we're trying to nourish ourselves. So for example, if you had a bowl of pasta and you're like, okay, I have this bowl of pasta. I'm a big pasta person. Great. Can we add like a nice green salad with it? I want things to show that they can coexist. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So yeah, those are like the small things. And there's also a special code if you download the guide, and you can get 25% off.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And we will share the link in the show notes below to the guide. We'll also share the link to Maitha's Instagram, where you can get your hands on some more of her treats. And speaking of your business, Maitha, can you give us some advice for moms that are launching their business and are just really trying to figure out how to do it?
Right. So the advice I would give if you want to start something is, number one is actually start. I know that sounds so basic, but we always get so caught up with the small minor details. If you can just, for example, you're like, oh, I've been wanting to do this. At the start, dedicate at least an hour. If you can do 1 hour a week for right now, where it's all about the business, whether it's the name of the business, the concept, what kind of product you're thinking, if it's a service, just start doing it that way, because I think that's like more manageable. And then when you finally have what is it that you want to sell, or what is the concept that you have, don't invest so much money to begin with. I feel like it's important is to have a little bit of that proof of concept, maybe share it around, not necessarily only with friends and family, but even those that's what I love about Instagram, right? Like you can start to be like, hey, you look like you'd be great potential customer or my ideal client. Would you mind trying this? And that's amazing, because then you can really get proper feedback from it. So, going into that route, and then just kind of give yourself a little bit grace. You don't have to have everything figured out. You will learn as you go. Just like as a mom, you will learn as you go. So yeah, I think hopefully that's helpful.
That's amazing. And then to end the episode, if you were to give an advice for moms out there, how can they reduce comparison in their household? How can they integrate a little bit more self-kindness to themselves, right?
Yeah.
First, well, it is called self-kindness.
Yeah.
And then I said to themselves, what would that advice be?
So first of all, the advice is, number one is be mindful of the way you talk about others and how you talk about yourself. Because when you talk about others, your kids are also listening, and they'll think that, this person, I know this person by how they look, versus like focusing on their qualities. So when we talk about, say, a friend, be like, oh gosh, I love her because she does this so well. She's such a kind person. She, she knows how to entertain, or something like that. It's like highlighting the quality. And in the world of comparison, I feel like I would do a social media cleanse, number one. If there are people that don't make you feel good, that's okay. Don't judge yourself for it. And it can be someone even who's really close to you. You can mute them or you can unfollow them, number one. And I really want you to be kind to yourself, because right now we live in this world where it is really confusing. So for example, if you are like a new mom, we're like, oh, no, don't worry about the bounce back culture. But also, you have to look good. Or, don't worry about eating healthy, but also you should really have clean eating. So I think there's just so much contradiction. And I just want you to like have that grace to give yourself some of that compassion.
Amazing. Thank you so much,
Thank
Maitha.
you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. You can always find me on contact@madinatmom.com, www.madinatmom.com, or on our Instagram @madinatmom. If you have a story of your own to share, you can share it with us. And until next time, make sure to take care of yourselves as fiercely as you take care of your little ones.